Hello, and thank you for joining me again at All Things Player King, a channel dedicated to the investigation and deconstruction of the play, The Player King by Darin. This is episode 6. We'll be looking at scene 6, Born with a Caul. As always, if you enjoy what you see, if you're inspired or you're intrigued, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. I've also added a link in the description of the channel and the description of this page. If you feel so compelled, if you feel generous and are interested in helping me to continue with my artistic endeavors, I would be very humbled and grateful. Without any further ado, The Player King, Scene 6, Born with a Caul. Scene 6, Born with a Caul. In a fury, he grabs his coat from the chair and storms down stage center. He is Edwin again. Emphatic. Edwin. On November 13th, 1833, it rained fire from the sky. The Earth, in her lonely trek about the solar system, crossed paths with a forgotten comet, making an ancient heliocentric pilgrimage around the sun. The fire seemed to come from a cluster of stars called the Leonids, and it bathed the planet with heavenly sparks for several awe-inspiring evenings. And it was on this night that I was born with a caul. The superstitious and wide-eyed servants assured my parents that this was a sign from the heavens that I was bound for greatness. The meteor shower and the caul were a promise of the blessings that God had bound by fate for the life of this child. But oh, Johnny. Such is the way with signs and sigils and omens and portents. They are far too easily misread or abused. I was born with a caul. Now, for those of you who do not know, being born with a caul is the occasion when a child emerges from the womb with the amniotic sac still wrapped around his face and head. A slit is carefully cut over the child's nose and mouth so the baby can breathe. Then the midwife takes a piece of parchment paper and presses it to the child's face. The amniotic sac sticks to this paper, and this is peeled away with great care. This caul, now preserved on the paper, becomes a family heirloom or a good luck charm. A caul was said to prevent men from drowning, so sailors would pay small fortunes for these tokens to ensure their safety at sea. In any event, it was said to protect its bearer from harm. I carried mine with me for many years. And there were numerous times where I could swear with certainty I would have come to great injury had not the influence of the caul saved me. In 1861, I was engaged to play Europe for the first time. My star was on the rise, and the fortuitous portents from the evening of my birth seemed to be playing out just as fated. And then, suddenly, a shot was fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina, and the entire nation was ripped asunder. My brother Joseph was in medical school in Charleston, and he found himself ministering to the Confederate wounded. My brother Johnny was a rabid anti-abolitionist. We could scarcely stand to be in the same room together. My sisters vacillated between their support of the North or for the South, finally landing on the side of the Union, and my sweet, sweet mother refused to take sides in a conflict that was ruthlessly tearing her family apart. My good friend from the theater, Richard Carey, enlisted in the 2nd Regiment, Massachusetts. He was determined to play his part. to play his part, defending the sanctity of the nation. Before I departed, I insisted that he take my caul, hoping that it might protect him in these dark days ahead. Now, I would like to say that it was my engagement in London that prevented me from making a similar commitment, but I cannot pretend that I was a man ever meant for war. Believe me, I would have put the run in the battle at Bull Run. Nah. I have never known a soldier who was not cut from special cloth. A soldier tends to represent all the very best qualities that we as a people admire or aspire to. Gallantry, honesty, diligence, and bravery are all hallmarks of these fine individuals. May we please take a moment to gratefully acknowledge these people whose calling far exceeds the expectations of those whom they are engaged to defend. Upon returning to America, I received a telegram informing me that Captain Richard Carey had been killed in action at the Battle of Antietam. 14,000 Union soldiers were lost on that day. Over 11,000 Confederate soldiers were lost on that day. I lost my friend, and I lost my caul. Not very lucky, I would say. One of the things that I really enjoyed about performing this scene is this is the only moment in the play, I think, where I really allow Edwin to get angry. And he bursts into the scene after the energy of the previous scene and has his own description of omens and portents based on what he was told from his birth, in contrast to the prophecy that Johnny receives and then misinterprets or misapplies. And he comes into this moment throwing on his coat with all of this angry energy, which carries him into the story of the scene. Really, one of the best parts about this scene, writing it and performing it, was again this idea of magic and the mystical elements that I wove into it, and with the caul and the meteor shower on Edwin's birth. I thought these things were really fascinating, and this allowed me to do some sort of research about the nature of the caul and the folklore associated with the caul that I then applied to the story that I was telling. When I was performing this scene one night, it was very interesting. There was a woman in the audience, and when I started the scene, she leaned forward and got really excited and started talking about the caul. And she was like, yes. And I was like, I wonder what that's all about. And then after the performance, she approached me and said that she had been doing research about the folklore associated with cauls just recently, and it was sort of serendipitous that she came to see the show having just done this research. And so we had a long talk about that. It was very interesting and very useful and really exciting to say, one of the several times where I had somebody in the audience who was very excited about what they were seeing for personal and immediate reasons. And it just reinforced one of the reasons for doing theater at all. The other thing is the meteor shower. Now, I kept reading about this meteor shower in the biographies of Edwin Booth and the fire in the sky, and I was like, what is this actually all about? So I started doing astronomical research, and this is one of those things that I really enjoy about theater, and enjoy doing with theater, is laying in, you know, the historical and theatrical researches and the art and the craft, but also finding other ways in which the sciences and the histories layer in. So I was like, okay, what meteor shower takes place in November? And it was the Leonids. And then I was like, okay, let's see what happened on November 13th, 1833. And I came across all of these newspaper articles about the famous Leonid shower of 1833. And it literally did just rain fire from the skies. And it was a heavenly spectacle. And it was in this, during this astronomical event that Edwin Booth was born. And I just thought that was so exciting, making those connections and doing that research and pulling these things together and trying to tell my version of this story. In my early researches, it was implied to me that Edwin had given his call to a friend who had enlisted to fight for the Union. And I wasn't really sure how that was. And in fact, the story may be a little apocryphal. As I research things in order to look at what I'm doing with this channel. So the story of him giving the call to a soldier may be apocryphal, but at the time that I wrote it, that's the information that I had. And I wasn't sure to whom he might have given it. And based on his relationship with people and based on the people that he knew that were documented to have become soldiers, I ended up putting that call in the hands of Richard Carey. And I did that because during the research, I went through lists of soldiers who had fallen on the battlefield, and I found that Richard Carey had died in battle at the Battle of Cedar Mountain. Now, I'm not like a military historian, and this battle was very close to the Battle at Antietam. And so I sort of, not knowing exactly the military history, I sort of conflated the two and put him near or in the Battle of Antietam for the story that I was telling here in this scene. And it's just the stories and the relationships as you read them are just so human, and documentary evidence of Edwin weeping when he hears that his friend Richard Carey has been killed. Anyway, I put the call in Richard Carey's pocket at the Battle of Antietam. The other potential option for the character who was to receive the call was a man named Adam Badeau, who was a very famous theater critic at the time and a friend of Edwin Booth's, and something of a dandy about town. He eventually became aide-de-camp to Ulysses S. Grant, and he was actually present at Appomattox when Lee surrendered. And in one of the source materials, it's indicated that Adam Badeau was openly homosexual. And many of the other biographies whitewash this, but this information comes from a highly reliable source, historian. And I just think that aspect is really fascinating. The more I explore these ideas of gender and gender identity and the history of gender identity and sexuality, and I feel like the character of Adam Badeau is really, really fascinating. And it's one of my main goals in performing this play was encouraging people to get out into their libraries and their bookstores and read and investigate and find out what happened to these other characters and find out what happened to Edwin Booth after the events of the play and the details of John Wilkes Booth's life and Junius Brutus and Laura Keene and George Spear and Ulysses S. Grant and Abraham Lincoln and all these people associated with the story that I'm telling. I was hoping that it would excite people and invigorate people and be a launching pad for their own investigations. There's that. Anyway, Adam Badeau, really interesting cat. And here, as in the play, I guess I would just like to take a moment to thank our veterans. this is another moment in the play, like earlier in the stage manager. When I was writing this, and for whatever reason, I was feeling somewhat patriotic. My father was a veteran. We have many family members. My uncle was a veteran. We have many family members who are veterans. And I felt like I had an opportunity to sort of voice my gratitude for the sacrifices and the service. And so I put that in the play. Early on in the process, the first director I had associated with this show was a man named John Fusco, who's a fantastic writer, a fantastic director, a fantastic actor. He's probably best known for writing the play Tracers. And in fact, he had stepped up to direct the show for me, and we had had many conversations. But then they were remounting they were remounting a production of Tracers, and he had to step away from the show to go participate in that. That kind of, in and out happens often in the theater world and in Los Angeles. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank him, and he was a Vietnam veteran. I did an early rehearsal for him and John Flynn, by the way, of Rogue Theater fame. Very, very early on when I first got back to Los Angeles. Anyway, I'd like to thank John Fusco and John Flynn, I guess, and thank our veterans. And also these comments about soldiers is also like a song of hope. This is like what I envision a soldier to be. It's the ideal to me of a soldier. There is a kind of admonition in this note to the soldiers about what we should be, about what we should be aspiring to, and not just as soldiers, but as people and citizens, making good choices and striving for nobility. I don't know where to go from here, so I guess we'll stop for today. Thank you again for joining me, and if you are inspired or you are intrigued, again, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Share this channel with your friends. Please go out and investigate the book, The Player King, a play by Darin, available on Amazon.com. And read and go see live theater and support your artists and support your actors. Thank you.